Welcome to Midweek Experiments in Faithfulness. This is a weekly facilitated spiritual practice where we learn and grow with each other in community. My name is Brent, and I am the program and engagement manager here at Beacon Hill Friends House. We are a Quaker center, home to Beacon Hill Friends meeting, and we are a residential community of about 20 people. Tonight we have Lahari Indraganti, and they are presenting gracious self-honesty. Art has been used as a conduit for self-honesty for a long time, but we don't always make the most judges when it comes to ourselves. In this midweek, we'll be grounding ourselves with meditation and Mary Oliver's poetry. Then we'll be using a framework that allows us some distance to critique ourselves with grace and humility. If you don't already have some paper and a pen, please feel free to grab that as well as any art supplies you might have handy. Now, I'm excited to introduce you to Lahari Indraganti. Lahari is a Quaker-curious botanist and cooperative-living enthusiast. They care deeply about building community, sustainability, and mindfulness.
Thank you so much, Brent, and welcome, May. It's really lovely to have you both here. I have been grappling with the idea of self-honesty in earnest. I mean, honestly, for as long as I've been alive, as I'm sure all of you have too. But especially more intensely in the last year or so, in light of everything that's been going on around the world. I think people are getting more in touch with their sense of justice. Certainly, I know I have been, especially, I think what's been going on in Palestine has galvanized so many people, especially young people, as we've seen their work for advocacy for Palestinian justice on college campuses and encampments there. I also think it's called forth this culture of self-honesty where people who've been entrenched either in cultures of oppression or propaganda sort of trying to disentangle from that. And that gave me the idea for this midweek. So I feel like self-honesty, especially as someone who, in my case, struggles with anxiety and mental health, I have a hard time being an objective judge. So I was like, surely this can't have been my own problem. Surely other people deal with this too. And in chatting about it with folks, I've found that most people probably deal with this idea of the overcritical self. But also, I think sometimes people take it to the other extreme of maybe not being critical enough. I know that, like, when I did cognitive behavioral therapy, it teaches you all these tools of like, oh, you're mind reading, or oh, you're catastrophizing, or oh, you're doing this and you're being so critical. And for like 99% of the times, it's so applicable to so many intrusive thoughts that we have, certainly that I've had. And I found that framework to be really, really helpful. But I was having a hard time navigating that new framework with my intrusive thoughts, but also recognizing when to differentiate between an intrusive thought and an inner critic. So I think the inner critic needs to be welcomed and nourished because they're important. Their presence in our lives is important. It helps us become better. It's life-giving. But also, when is that inner critic an intrusive thought? When is that inner critic just too harsh? And so I wanted to come up with a framework for me that could help me differentiate with discernment, to recognize when sometimes criticism is helpful and important, and maybe when it's not. So I want to say I won't be going into any specific heavy topics, and I welcome you to invite those into your life or any sort of critiques into your life with discernment too. Sometimes we just aren't ready for harsh criticism of ourselves, and it's okay to take a pause and come back later. So I will invite you to go as far as you want to and no further than that, to preserve your mental health, preserve yourself for the next day. So with all of that sort of like preamble, I want to take a moment to settle myself. I find that maybe like closing my eyes, imagining a place of comfort can be really helpful. But I also want to offer some alternative modalities. For some, movement can be really helpful. So getting up, shaking it out, stretching can be really helpful. For some others, like maybe laying down, closing your eyes, sitting in some silence can be really helpful. So I will try what works for me, and I want to welcome you to do what works for you. So I feel like, just as a side note, I was telling Brent about this earlier. I fell really hard on my hip earlier today. I was just like walking around my house, and I was wearing really slippery slippers. I guess they're called slippers for a reason. So I think I need to get up and shake out the sort of like tension that my body's holding. So I will invite you to do what feels right for your body. So if that feels right, then that feels right. I want to now invite you, if you're able, to close your eyes, take a deep breath, breathe in and breathe out. And picture yourself being in a place of comfort, a place of safety and serenity, satiety and satisfaction. Remember what that feels like in your heart and in your body. Do you feel that warm glow of that loving embrace? Remember that place, that it is there for you when you need it, that if anything in this feels too hard and too hurtful, that you always have that place to go back to. A place free of shame and full of love. A place of compassion, generous spirit, and gentleness. Where your tender heart can be tended to and comforted in safety. Remember that this place is there for you when you need it most. When you feel ready, I want to invite you to bring your senses back to this company, to all four of us in this virtual Zoom room. I want to begin by reading a poem called The Turtle. from Mary Oliver's incredible, I don't actually know what book it is specifically, but it's from New and Selected Poems, Volume 1. I'll put up an e-version of it on my screen right now so y'all can see it as well. Whoops, that's the wrong poem, actually. Okay, I think it's The Turtle. Did I miss it? Okay, perfect. I hope you can all see it. So if you can, just let me know. Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. The turtle breaks from the blue-black skin of the water, dragging her shell with its mossy scoots, across the shallows and through the rushes, and over the mudflats to the uprise, to the yellow sand, to dig with her ungainly feet, a nest, and hunker there spewing her white eggs down into the darkness. You think of her patience, her fortitude, her determination to complete what she was born to do. And then you realize a greater thing. She doesn't consider what she was born to do. She's only filled with an old blind wish. It isn't even hers, but came to her in the rain or the soft wind, which is the gate through which her life keeps walking. She can't see herself apart from the rest of the world, or the world from what she must do every spring. Crawling up that high hill, luminous under the sand that has packed against her skin, she doesn't dream, she knows. She is part of the pond she lives in. The tall trees are her children. The birds that swim above her are tied to her by an unbreakable string. I specifically wanted to read you this poem because I feel like it reiterates to me that we all belong in this vast universe, even if in moments we feel like we don't. Like maybe we are just part of vast nothingness, but we are part of something, and we were put on this earth. We have intrinsic value. We belong here. Jumping off that revelation, I want to move into our first activity. So this basically came out of a sense of, if we are unreliable narrators, who are the reliable narrators? And I realized I have a handful of people in my life. Fortunately enough for me, some of them are my parents, and others are my chosen family, like some of my dearest friends. I feel like they're incredible at letting me know when I'm being too critical, to let me know that they love me and care about me, and yet to also always be vigilant for when I've fallen short and when I can do better. And I feel like I want to conjure that. I want to invite that person into my life, or the vision of that person into my life, to help my inner critic know and discern when they're maybe being too harsh. Maybe they're being not vigilant enough. So I want to invite you in your mind to first conjure a time when this person in your life, be it a best friend, a parent, a child, a confidant, your significant other, spouse, whomever it may be, a loved one in your life, who maybe let you know that you'd fallen short, or maybe let you know that you could do better, or express to you a concern in a loving and gentle way. And maybe think about what happened after. How do you respond? How did that feel to you? How did that feel in the moment? How did that feel weeks after? And assuming this happened a while ago, how does that feel now? I want to invite you to maybe make this something that's not super, super hard to think about. Maybe that one that is just a springboard for you to think about this concept, to bring that close person in your life to help that inner critic of yours. So maybe we can take about like 6 to 7 minutes to sit down, think about this moment, and write about some of those feelings. I will repeat those questions and also put them in the chat. How did that feel like to you in the moment? How did that feel a week after? And maybe a bit after that? Has that changed your relationship with the person? So I'll put these questions in the chat. You don't have to answer every single one of them. I just want to use the questions as a springboard to help you think about the role of this person in helping your inner critic. So maybe about like 5 to 6 minutes to sit on that, mull that over. Does that feel like enough time? Would you like some more time? No. Okay, thank you. Okay, so before we go into how that felt like for people, I want to ask if we could take another moment to just sort of sit back, do some more broader reflection. I'm going to read another poem by Mary Oliver, and then we'll go into our next segment. So again, I want to highlight that I want to frame all of this within the language of love. Self-honesty with grace is, in my opinion, grace towards self, in my opinion, is the only way to move forward with self-honesty without it becoming self-flagellation. So I want to read another poem by Mary Oliver that I think really highlights that sense of belonging in self. So this one is called Landscape. So I'll pull that up in the book as well. Give me just 1 second. It's the poem on the left. It goes, "Isn't it plain the sheets of moss, except that they have no tongues, could lecture all day if they wanted about spiritual patience? Isn't it clear the black oaks along the path are standing as though they were the most fragile of flowers? Every morning I walk like this around the pond, thinking, if the doors of my heart ever close, I am as good as dead. Every morning so far I'm alive. And now the crows break off from the rest of the darkness and burst up into the sky, as though all night they had thought of what they would like their lives to be and imagined their strong, thick wings." I specifically picked this poem because I really like that last line. All night they had thought of what they would like their lives to be and imagined their strong, thick wings. To me, it makes me realize that I have the capacity for change. I have the capacity for doing things even if my inner voice is telling me I can't, or that I'm not good enough, or that I'm somehow too bad and too evil and I've done too many bad things. That I can, because I still have these wings, these thick wings. I would be remiss if I didn't mention this place I was in about 2 years ago. I was living in the house, the friend's house at the time, as I do now. And I was going through a particularly dark time, especially struggling with climate grief. Like really debilitating climate grief where I could not get out of it. I just was in a complete spiral of doomerism. It felt like no matter what action I took, it wasn't enough. My inner critic was all messed up. Every day I would wake up and I would hear messages of, I'm taking up too much space, and even rebreathing is contributing to global climate change because I'm breathing out carbon dioxide, like just really bad stuff like that. And it was really hard to cope. I had a really, really hard time just functioning as a human being without completely being down on myself and not being able to recognize at all what was needed critique, needed criticism. And just to sort of falling into a spiral of doom spiraling. And I had a really hard time. I was really challenged every moment of the day. Every action I took, I remember I used to keep a carbon diary at the time, which me now sort of scoffs at, because I'm like, that's so intense and unnecessary and not helpful in the least. I would like count to the minute how long my showers were. I would count to like, I would be counting like how much food I was eating in grams, so I could like, it was like, I mean, this is like really messed up stuff. And it's like, oh, I can't eat this, I can't eat that, because it was like so tied up into every aspect of my life. I remember being like, I can't wear this, or I can't do this on this day. I can't take the train here. I have to only walk, and it's not in walking distance, so I can't go there. And it was just sort of like me turning into a shut-in. And I remember talking to a friend of mine, one of my closest friends, and who was my friend who was vegan with me and sort of like is an environmentalist as well. And I remember just I was telling her I was like so proud of all this work I was doing, and she was like, all right, as someone who loves and cares about you, this sounds sick, like it sounds insane, like you're not well. And I remember like hearing that, being like, what, you're not happy for me? Like, I'm trying to do my best here. Like, you don't see this, you don't see me trying to do all this work to like support my goals and values. And I remember her saying like, no, you're gonna die this way. This is not, I don't want to see you doing this. This is not good for you. This is not supportive of the ultimate goal of bringing about justice for everybody and the environment. And I remember just sitting back completely dumbfounded, unable to sit with the fact this person was so close to me, who had done so much of this sort of work with, was just like, no, this is wrong. Like, you are seeing this all wrong. And as someone who cares about you, I can't see you doing this. You need to stop. I think I remember just like immediately scoffing and just sort of like getting really defensive. And I think I knew, because I trusted her innately, that she was right, but I wasn't ready to listen to it yet. So it took me like a few more weeks of sort of like doing this and realizing like, oh, I am not happy. I'm really unhappy and I'm not unwell. And finally one night I remembered like, I was like 3 a.m. and I was on some like obscure Reddit forum and seeing people doing the same thing as me and realizing this isn't the way. Like, they're doing it wrong. Like, I see that now. And immediately texting her being like, you were so right. Like, this is insane and I need help and I want help. And being able to be in a place finally where I could hear what she was saying. It was the first thing I thought of when I thought of this activity, is like my dear friend who cared so much about me, like literally holding my hand, being like, well, I guess figuratively because she lives in California, but like holding my hand, being like, no, you can't do this. You can't keep doing this. And because I trusted her so much and I trusted her integrity, I was finally able to be like, oh yeah, this is insane. This is not right. Like I know I specifically gave the instruction of like, please choose something light. And I told a story of like the super dark thing that happened in my life. But I guess the reason I mentioned that story is because it kind of goes in with this idea of critique. Like, I was critiquing to a point where it was just an existential threat to me. And I think there is such a thing as the inner critic going so far, like too far. And I feel like now that I've healed from that, I've been able to grow from that sense of like all or nothing and sort of like extreme self-flagellation. I was feeling in the last few months, I'm not doing enough. I've gone to the other end. So I was like, I need to find a balance. And I'm going to make a midweek about it so I can like drag you along with me. So thank you again for that. Thank you for indulging me in that little segue, for allowing me to talk about that really important moment in my life. So that is a sort of interesting segue into the next portion. And I'm going to read the last poem before we head into the last piece. And I just want to issue a fair warning here. This one is called 1945 to 1985, Poem for the Anniversary. And it's also by Mary Oliver. It does talk about the Holocaust. So if that is something you're not in a place to listen about, you're welcome to meet your needs in whatever way feels right to you. It's a sort of longish poem. It's about 4 pages. I will be moving the pages along in the digital books, and I'll read slowly so you can catch up. But if that doesn't feel right to you, you're welcome to switch off for a little bit, join us in like a couple minutes. I will maybe do like a signal like that if you want to mute me. But yeah, this is the poem. It's called Poem for the Anniversary, and I'll put it up on the screen momentarily. So the poem goes, sometimes, walking for hours through the woods, I don't know what I'm looking for. Maybe for something shy and beautiful to come, frisking out the undergrowth. Once a fawn did just that. My dog didn't know what dogs usually do. And the fawn didn't know. As for the doe, she was probably down in the round pond, swizzling up the sweet marsh grass and dreaming that everything was fine. The way I'd like to go on living in this world wouldn't hurt anything. I just go on walking uphill and downhill, looking around, and so what if half the time I don't know what for? And so what if it doesn't come to the hill of beans? So what if I vote liberal, and I'm Jewish or Lutheran, or game warden, or bingo addict, and smoke a pipe? In the films of Dachau and Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen, and the dead rise from the earth and are piled in front of us, the starved stare across 40 years, and lush green musical Germany shows again its iron claw, which won't ever be forgotten, which won't ever be understood, but which did slowly for years scrape across Europe, while the rest of the world did nothing. Oh, you never saw, oh, sorry, I'm realizing I didn't do that. Oh, you never saw such a good leafy place, and everything was fine. My dog and the fawn did a little dance. They didn't get serious. Then the fawn clambered away through leaves, and my gentle dog followed me away. Oh, you never saw such a garden. 100 kinds of flowers in bloom, a waterfall for pleasure and nothing else. The garden furniture is white, tables and chairs in the cool shade. A man sits there the long afternoon before him. He is finishing lunch, some kind of fruits, chicken, and a salad, a bottle of wine with a thin and beaded neck. He fills a glass. You can tell it is real crystal. He lifts it to his mouth and drinks peacefully. It is the face of Mengele. Later, the doe came wandering back in the twilight. She stepped through the leaves. She hesitated, sniffing the air. Then she knew everything. The forest grew dark. She nuzzled her child wildly. I picked this poem because I felt like it dealt with the conundrum of choice. It made me think about the choices we make on a daily basis, what we do every day, the things that seem banal, the things that don't. And I wanted us to reflect, if we could, on looking towards the future. Maybe you will have something happen in the next few years that you'll have to think about critically. A choice you'll make or a choice you don't make. How can you, along with your inner critic, and let's say the friend of your inner critic, who is your loved one, who has been honest with you and has helped you, how can the team of you help you figure out this choice? Maybe you're already going through a conundrum that you could use in this exercise. Or maybe you foresee something coming up that you could use in this exercise. How could you use better discernment to know? I mean, this is honestly a straight up question. Like, I want to know the answer too. So if you guys find something in your meditations, please let me know. I would love to know the answer too. or like your version of the answer. So I'm also pondering this, and we'll all ponder together in the next couple of minutes. So the question is, how can the team of you, your inner critic, and your inner critic's friend, or your enriched inner critic, I guess, the team of you, how can you help yourself navigate these conundrums? Specifically, questions of how much is enough? When do you stop? When do you know it's self-flagellation and not criticism? I know those are a lot of questions, but I feel like they're sort of circling around the same thing, which is, when is enough? When can, not that you need to stop ever, but sort of like, when do you get to take a step back? I'll put them all in the chat as well. So I guess now is our second activity to write journal or do art, whatever feels right. And then we'll come back in like 5 minutes to chat together. So